The wind struck the walls of the compound like an angry spirit. Rain pounded the roof so hard that the entire house trembled. Lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the courtyard for brief moments before darkness swallowed everything again. Inside the small room, Adaeze voice screamed. Another wave of pain tore through her body, forcing her fingers to clutch the mat beneath her.
Push!
Push!
Adaeze,
Adaeze, push! The midwife urged urgently. Sweat covered Adaeze's face despite the cold wind sneaking through the cracked window. I can't, she cried weakly. You can, the midwife insisted. One more push. Outside the room, Chief Maduka paced back and forth under the veranda. His feet moved quickly across the wet floor. Back and forth. Back and forth. Every cry from inside the room tightened something in his chest. This child mattered more than all the others. Tonight had to be different. He stopped pacing and looked toward the dark sky. Ancestors, he muttered under his breath. You know my heart. Do not shame me again. A loud cry suddenly rose from inside the room. Then another sound followed. The sharp cry of a newborn child. Maduka froze. The door opened slowly. The midwife stepped out holding the baby wrapped in cloth. Maduka rushed toward her immediately. Well, he demanded. The midwife hesitated. Maduka frowned. What is it? He asked impatiently. The woman lowered her eyes. My chief, the child is healthy. Maduka's voice hardened. I did not ask about health. He leaned closer. Is it a boy? The midwife swallowed. For a long moment she did not speak. Then she said quietly, It is a girl. Thunder exploded in the sky. Maduka stared at her as if he had not heard correctly. A girl, he repeated slowly. The midwife nodded nervously. Yes, my chief. Maduka turned away sharply. His hands trembled. Another one, he whispered. Inside the room, Adaeze held the baby gently against her chest. Despite the pain in her body, a soft smile appeared on her lips. My child, she whispered lovingly. She kissed the baby's forehead. You are beautiful. But she could already hear the silence outside the room. And that silence frightened her more than anger, because she knew exactly what it meant. The midwife slowly entered the room again. Adaeze looked at her face immediately. How is he? Adaeze asked softly. The midwife hesitated. He is outside. Adaeze's heart tightened. Did he ask about the child? The midwife nodded. Adaeze closed her eyes. What did you tell him? The woman spoke gently. I told him the truth. Adaeze sighed quietly. A tear slid down the side of her face. My poor child, she whispered to the baby. You have entered a difficult world. Outside the room, Maduka stood in the rain. He lifted his face toward the sky. 7, he muttered bitterly. The rain continued falling heavily. 7 daughters. 7 times the midwife had come out with the same news. 7 times the village had whispered. 7 times his pride had been wounded. Behind him, footsteps approached. It was Ifeoma. She stood under the veranda, watching him silently. Well, she asked. Maduka laughed dryly. You already know the answer. Ifeoma crossed her arms. Another girl? Maduka did not respond. The silence answered her question. Ifeoma shook her head slowly. This woman will destroy your name. Maduka clenched his fists. For years he had ignored the whispers of the village. For years he had defended Adaeze. But tonight something inside him had finally broken. Inside the room, Adaeze looked at her newborn daughter again. You will be strong, she whispered softly. You must be strong. Because deep in her heart, she already felt that the storm outside the house was nothing compared to the storm that was about to begin inside her marriage. If this story has already caught your attention, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Because this story is only beginning, and what happens next will change the lives of everyone in this village forever. Long before that stormy night, before the whispers and bitterness, the compound of Maduka was once known as the happiest home in Kalagu village. People talked about the love between Maduka and Adaeze the way they talked about good harvests, something rare and worthy of admiration. Maduka had not always been the hard man he was becoming. In those early days he laughed easily. He worked his farms with pride, and when the sun began to set, he would return home carrying fresh vegetables or palm wine for his wife. One evening, shortly after their wedding, the two of them sat under the big udala tree beside their hut. The air was calm, and the village children were playing nearby. Maduka stretched his legs and sighed with satisfaction. "This is the life I wanted," he said. Adaeze smiled while weaving a basket. "And what life is that?" she asked playfully. Maduka pointed toward the small hut behind them. "A peaceful home," he said. He turned and looked at her with warmth in his eyes. "And a good woman beside me." Adaeze laughed softly. "You speak as if I might disappear tomorrow." Maduka leaned closer and lowered his voice. "You will not disappear," he said. "I searched for you too long to lose you easily." Adaeze shook her head shyly. "You did not search," she teased. "Our families arranged the meeting." Maduka smiled. "That may be true," he admitted. "But I chose you." He paused before continuing. "There were other women." Adaeze raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Now you are telling me this." Maduka laughed. "But none of them looked at me the way you did." Adaeze stopped weaving. "And how did I look at you?" Maduka leaned closer. "As if you saw the man I could become." Adaeze held his gaze for a moment. "Maybe I did." Maduka reached for her hand. "Together we will build something great," he said confidently. Adaeze squeezed his hand gently. "What kind of greatness?" Maduka's eyes sparkled with excitement. "A large family," he said. "Many children running through this compound." Adaeze laughed. "You want to turn this quiet place into a marketplace?" Maduka chuckled. "Yes. Sons who will farm beside me. Daughters who will fill the house with laughter." Adaeze rested her head lightly against his shoulder. "And will you love them all equally?" she asked softly. Maduka did not hesitate. "Of course." He looked at her seriously. "And I will love their mother even more." Those words had once filled Adaeze with peace. The villagers saw the way Maduka treated his wife and shook their heads in admiration. One afternoon, while men gathered around the palm wine hut, an elder named Okuri spoke about the young couple. "That man respects his wife too much," someone joked. Okuri smiled. "Respect in marriage is not weakness," he replied. "It is wisdom." Another man laughed. "We will see if he still respects her after she gives him daughters." Maduka, who had just arrived with a calabash of wine, heard the comment. He placed the drink on the table. "What is wrong with daughters?" he asked calmly. The men looked at him with amusement. "Nothing," one of them said. "But a man's name is carried by sons." Maduka shrugged. "When the time comes, I will have sons." The men raised their cups. "To sons," they shouted. Maduka drank with them. But as he walked home later that evening, he found Adaeze preparing food outside their hut. She looked up and smiled warmly. "Welcome home," she said. Maduka smiled back. And in that moment, he truly believed nothing could ever come between them. If you are enjoying this story so far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this carry powerful lessons, and your support helps keep them coming. Because the happiness in this home would soon face its first test. Not long after that evening under the udala tree, Adaeze noticed the changes in her body. She woke up one morning feeling dizzy and weak. At first she thought it was because she had worked too hard in the farm the previous day. But when the feeling continued for several days, the village midwife was called. The old woman examined her carefully and then smiled widely. "Congratulations," the midwife said. Adaeze blinked in surprise. "Congratulations for what?" The midwife laughed. "You are going to have a child." Adaeze covered her mouth in disbelief. "A child?" The woman nodded. "Yes." Adaeze immediately ran outside the hut. Maduka was sitting nearby repairing a farming tool. "Maduka," she called excitedly. He looked up. "What is it?" Adaeze was breathing quickly. "The midwife says, we are going to have a child." Maduka dropped the tool instantly. "What?" Adaeze laughed nervously. "We are going to be parents." Maduka stood up so fast that the stool behind him fell over. Then he began laughing loudly. "Did you hear that?" he shouted toward the nearby huts. "My wife is carrying my child." Neighbors soon gathered around, smiling and congratulating the couple. Maduka was glowing with pride. That evening he slaughtered a goat to celebrate. Men gathered in the compound drinking palm wine while women sang traditional songs for Adaeze. Maduka sat proudly among the men. An elder raised his cup. To the child that will soon arrive in Maduka's house. Everyone cheered. But the same elder added something else. May the ancestors give him a strong son. Maduka smiled confidently. They will. Months passed. Maduka became very protective of Adaeze. He refused to let her carry heavy loads. Sit down, he would say. But I can still work, Adaeze would argue. Maduka shook his head. My child is inside you, he replied. Our child, she corrected gently. Maduka smiled. Yes, our child. The day of the birth finally arrived. Adaeze's labor lasted many hours. Maduka waited outside the room anxiously. Finally, the door opened. The midwife stepped out holding a tiny baby. Maduka rushed forward immediately. How is my child? The midwife smiled warmly. A beautiful baby. Maduka looked closely. A boy. The midwife chuckled. No. Maduka blinked. It is a girl. For a moment he said nothing. Then he laughed softly. A girl. The midwife nodded. Yes. Maduka reached out and gently touched the baby's tiny hand. Well, he said after a moment, a child is a child. Inside the room, Adaeze watched him nervously. Are you disappointed? She asked quietly. Maduka shook his head. No. He placed the baby in her arms. She is our first child, he said. Adaeze smiled with relief. What shall we name her? Maduka thought for a moment. Then he said proudly, Kayamaka. Adaeze repeated the name softly. Kayamaka. God is beautiful. Maduka nodded. Yes. For a while, everything felt peaceful again. But later that evening, as the men gathered to drink palm wine, the elder Okuri spoke again. The first daughter is always a blessing, he said. Maduka nodded. But the next must be a son. Maduka laughed with the others. At that moment he did not realize that the simple words spoken that night would slowly begin to poison his happiness. If this story reminds you of real situations people face in many families, tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe, so you don't miss the rest of this powerful story. Because the next child that arrived would begin changing everything. The months passed quickly after Kayamaka's birth. Adaeze worked in the fields during the day, but she always made sure to return home to care for her daughter. Maduka, proud of his first child, spent hours holding Kayamaka, showing her off to neighbors and family. Then news came. Adaeze was pregnant again. Maduka's heart leapt with anticipation. This time he whispered to her every morning, surely this one will be a son. Adaeze smiled softly, though a shadow of worry lingered in her eyes. When the day came for the second child to arrive, labor was long and exhausting. The entire compound waited anxiously. Finally, the midwife appeared, holding another tiny child. Maduka ran forward immediately. Well? Is it a son? The midwife shook her head. It is another girl. For a moment silence fell over the room. Maduka's chest tightened. He forced a smile and reached for the baby. Another girl, he repeated, as if saying it out loud would help him accept it. She is beautiful. Adaeze, holding the newborn, glanced at him nervously. Are you disappointed? Maduka avoided her eyes. No, of course not, he said softly, though the sharp edge in his voice betrayed him. Outside the hut, news spread quickly. Neighbors and villagers began whispering. Some laughed quietly at the thought of Maduka, a proud man still celebrating daughters. At the evening gathering that night, Elder Okuri clapped Maduka on the shoulder. Another blessing, he said. But remember, your name must be carried forward by a son. Maduka's forced smile didn't reach his eyes. He nodded, saying nothing. Inside, a tiny seed of shame and pressure had taken root in his heart. Days passed. The jokes began in hushed tones at the market, in palm wine huts, at family visits. Maduka's house will soon be full of women, a neighbor whispered to another. I hope he can handle it, the other replied. Maduka heard none of it outwardly. He kept his pride carefully controlled, but each remark etched deeper into him, each one a reminder that he had not yet fulfilled what the village expected of him. A son. Adaeze noticed the subtle change. Maduka laughed less easily. He frowned more often. He no longer held her hand during walks to the market. Sometimes he returned late from the farm without explanation, avoiding her gaze. One evening she asked quietly while preparing food. Maduka, is something wrong? He sighed, staring into the fading light. Adaeze, I worry. About what? She asked gently. He hesitated. About our family, our name, whether it will endure. Adaeze felt a chill in her heart. She had known for some time that this conversation would come. Maduka, she said softly, a child's worth is not decided by whether it is a boy or a girl. Our love matters more than what others think. Maduka looked away, staring at the horizon. I know, Adaeze. I know, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. In the weeks that followed, his distance grew. He smiled less at Adaeze, and when he interacted with their daughters, there was always a measure of tension hidden behind polite words. The villagers noticed, and the whispers grew louder. Adaeze, meanwhile, nurtured her daughters with unwavering care. She whispered to Kayamika and the newborn, "You are a blessing. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." And though her heart ached at the subtle shift in her husband's behavior, she refused to allow it to poison her love for her children. If you are enjoying this story, pause for a moment to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what you would do in Adaeze's place. Because the challenges her family would face next would test not only her courage but the very foundation of Maduka's pride. The birth of the third daughter arrived quietly, but its impact on the household was anything but silent. Adaeze labored through the night, her cries mingling with the distant rumble of thunder. This time, even the midwife's face was grave when she emerged from the room, holding the tiny infant wrapped in a coarse cloth. Maduka rushed forward, his heart pounding. Is it? He asked, hope clinging to his voice. The midwife shook her head gently. Another girl, my chief. Maduka's chest tightened. He stared at the small bundle, the tiny fingers grasping at the air. He forced a smile, though the tension in his jaw betrayed the disappointment he could not fully hide. Adaeze looked up at him, searching his face. Maduka, are you angry? She whispered, cradling the baby close. He ran a hand over his face, avoiding her eyes. No, I am happy. Yes, happy, he said quickly, as if repeating the word enough would make it true. But happiness was not in his heart. It had begun to slip away the moment the villagers' whispers found their way into his pride. By the afternoon, neighbors had begun to gossip again. Some joked openly at the market. Maduka's house is turning into a hall of women. 7 daughters, they say. Maduka heard the rumors. Each comment felt like a tiny dagger slicing through him. Yet he said nothing, keeping his frustration locked inside. Adaeze, aware of the growing tension, tried to maintain peace. She smiled, tended to the baby, and whispered words of love and reassurance to her children. But the walls of the compound now held a heavy silence. Laughter came rarely, and even the sound of the wind through the trees felt harsh. Maduka became quieter at home. He spoke less to Adaeze, returned later from the fields, and avoided sitting with the children for long. His pride, once the source of joy and confidence, now made him rigid and distant. One afternoon, Adaeze approached him while he was repairing a tool in the yard. Maduka, please tell me what is wrong, she said softly. He looked up, his eyes dark with thought. Adaeze, I worry. Our family, the village, the name I promised to honor. You worry because of the children? She asked gently. He nodded slowly. The world expects sons. Our name is important. I do not know if I can bear to fail again. Adaeze's heart ached. She knelt beside him, placing her hand over his. Maduka, listen. Your name is not carried by sons alone. It is carried by love, by care, by the values you teach your children. Daughters are just as precious as sons. They can carry honor, respect, and greatness. Maduka looked at her, his chest heaving with conflicting emotions. He wanted to believe her, yet the pressure of tradition and pride weighed heavily on him. Weeks passed. The village continued its subtle teasing, and Maduka's distance only grew. He stopped holding the children for long, stopped laughing as freely, stopped walking with Adaeze through the fields. Inside, Adaeze held her daughters close. She whispered nightly, "You are strong. You are a blessing. Never doubt your worth." The first seed of resentment toward Adaeze's daughters had begun to root in Maduka's heart, though he did not yet understand the danger it posed to his family. If this story has gripped you so far, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment about what you think Maduka should do. Because soon, his next decision would change everything. The morning sun rose over the compound, but it brought no warmth. The laughter that had once filled Maduka Nwoy's home was gone, replaced by a cold, tense silence. Adaeze moved carefully through the courtyard, tending to Kayamika and the two younger daughters, unaware of the storm brewing in her husband's mind. Maduka had spent the night walking in the fields, staring at the horizon thinking. His chest still felt tight from disappointment, his pride wounded by the repeated births of daughters instead of the sons he desperately desired. Finally he returned home. Adaeze noticed the seriousness in his steps. He stopped at the doorway where she was preparing food. "Adaeze," he said slowly. She looked up, sensing the weight in his voice. "What is it?" Maduka ran a hand through his hair. "I have made a decision." Her heart tightened. "A decision about what?" He hesitated, then spoke with a firmness that sent a chill through her. "I am bringing another wife into this house." Adaeze froze. The knife in her hand slipped slightly. "Another wife?" she whispered. "Yes," Maduka replied, avoiding her gaze. "I need a son to carry the name." Tears stung Adaeze's eyes, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Maduka, do you not see what this will do? Our daughters, this household." He shook his head. "I have thought long and hard. I cannot risk the family name being lost. A son must come from elsewhere if not from you." Adaeze pressed her hands together, her voice trembling. "And what of love? What of loyalty? Must a wife be punished for something she cannot control?" Maduka looked at her, torn between pride, fear and lingering affection. "Adaeze, you have given me daughters and I am grateful. But a man must have sons. Our ancestors, the village, they will not forgive weakness." For a long moment the only sound was the soft breeze rustling the leaves. Adaeze swallowed hard. She could see that no argument would change him. "I understand," she said quietly. "If this is what you must do, then I will not stand in your way." Maduka's chest tightened further, but he said nothing. He turned and walked to the compound gate, signaling that he would begin preparations for the new wife's arrival. In the days that followed, the entire village whispered. News of Maduka's plan spread quickly. Some men praised him for seeking a male heir. Others shook their heads, pitying Adaeze. The day Ifeoma arrived, she stepped into the compound with confidence and a smile that carried pride. She greeted Adaeze politely, but her eyes betrayed a quiet challenge. From the first moment, it was clear she intended to assert her presence. Adaeze watched silently, her heart heavy. She held her daughters close, whispering softly, "Do not fear. We will endure. We will grow strong." Maduka, meanwhile, welcomed the new wife with a mixture of relief and anticipation. He hoped that through her, the sons he longed for would arrive. But in his heart, he did not yet see the consequences that would follow. Consequences that would tear his family apart. As Ifeoma settled in, she looked around the house and smirked. "It seems we have a lot of work to do," she said lightly, though her tone carried an edge of superiority. Adaeze said nothing, only pressing her daughters closer to her. She could feel the tension thickening in the air. A storm unlike any outside. The storm of jealousy, pride, and the hunger for control. The village watched eagerly. People whispered about how the two women would coexist, who would dominate, and whether the daughters would survive the growing household rivalries. If this story is already keeping you on the edge of your seat, take a moment now to hit the like button, subscribe and comment below what you think will happen next. Because with the arrival of Ifeoma, nothing would ever be the same in Maduka Nwoy's household. The morning Ifeoma arrived, the sun seemed unusually bright, though inside the compound, the air was thick with tension. She stepped out of the carriage with poise, her embroidered wrapper swaying gracefully with each step. She was confident, assertive, and there was a spark in her eyes that seemed to challenge the very walls of the house. Adaeze stood near the doorway, holding Kayamika and the two younger daughters tightly. She forced a polite smile, but her heart beat rapidly. She could feel the shift already. She had expected a new wife, but seeing Ifeoma step into the compound with such confidence made it real. Maduka greeted Ifeoma warmly. "Welcome to our home," he said. There was relief in his voice, a hint of hope. Perhaps he thought she would finally give him the sons he desired. "Thank you," Ifeoma replied. her voice light but full of authority. I am happy to be here. For the first few hours, Adaeze kept her distance, observing silently. She watched how Ifeoma walked around the compound, inspecting rooms, smiling at servants, and occasionally throwing glances toward the daughters. Adaeze whispered to Kayamaka, "Remember, my child, stay strong. Observe everything. Never let anyone make you feel small." Maduka, meanwhile, seemed caught between excitement and fear. He wanted sons. He wanted Ifeoma to succeed. Yet seeing her presence dominate the space he once shared solely with Adaeze was unnerving. Days passed. Ifeoma made her presence known. She demanded attention from the servants, received special meals, and spoke with authority that Adaeze could not challenge openly. The children watched from the corners, sensing a change in the house. One afternoon, Ifeoma approached Adaeze directly. "It is best if you let me handle some things," she said lightly. "I am here to bring sons. Surely you understand that." Adaeze nodded slowly, her lips pressed together. "I understand," she replied softly. Her heart burned, but she refused to show fear or anger. She could not give Ifeoma the satisfaction of seeing her despair. Maduka noticed the tension but said nothing. His eyes darted between the two women, silently judging, silently hoping that Ifeoma would deliver the male heir he longed for. Meanwhile, villagers whispered about the new wife. Some admired her boldness. Others worried about Adaeze and her daughters. Already, the seeds of rivalry had begun to grow. At night, Adaeze sat by the small lamp in her room, her daughters sleeping nearby. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "You must be strong, my girls. Love can endure even when it is tested. Pride and envy will come, but you must rise above them." The household began to shift. Even simple tasks like fetching water or cooking were now arenas of silent competition. Ifeoma insisted on certain ways, subtly undermining Adaeze's routines. Adaeze tolerated it, knowing that outward conflict would only escalate the tension. Maduka, caught in the middle, tried to maintain peace, but his heart leaned toward the one who might give him sons. He treated Adaeze politely but with distance, while Ifeoma slowly became the center of attention in the house. The first subtle battle had begun, not through words but through glances, gestures, and the way respect was divided. If you're already captivated by this story, pause to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts about Adaeze and her daughter's strength. Because the next chapter will bring the first son, and with him, the real danger for Adaeze and her children begins. Not long after Ifeoma settled into the compound, news spread that she was pregnant. Maduka's chest swelled with hope. This time he whispered every morning, "Surely this one will be a son." The anticipation filled the house like a quiet drumbeat, exciting, tense, impossible to ignore. Months passed, and the household waited anxiously. Adaeze tended to her daughters as usual, while Ifeoma rested in the main room, receiving the attention and care she had begun to command. Maduka visited her often, checking on her health, speaking to her softly, hoping the child would meet his expectations. Finally, the day arrived. Labor pains struck Ifeoma in the early hours, and the compound was stirred awake by the midwife's calls. Maduka ran to her side, hands trembling. He could barely contain his excitement. The midwife emerged hours later, holding a small, wailing infant wrapped in white cloth. "My chief, it is a boy," she announced. Maduka's face broke into a radiant smile. Relief, pride, and joy mingled in his expression. He reached out and took the baby, holding him high for everyone in the compound to see. "He is ours. He is ours," he shouted. The servants clapped and cheered. The women sang songs of blessing. Drums were beaten. Even the village elders came running, drawn by the sound of celebration. This child was not just a son. He was the heir, the pride of the Nwoi family, the fulfillment of years of longing. Adaeze watched silently from a distance, holding Kayamaka. Her heart sank. She felt a mixture of sadness, anger, and quiet resignation. She saw how everything had shifted. The attention that once focused on her children now poured over Ifeoma and her newborn. Ifeoma held the baby proudly, smiling as the crowd congratulated her. Then she turned to Adaeze. "You see," she said softly, though the words were sharp, "this is what it means to give a son to the family." Adaeze forced a calm smile. "He is indeed a blessing," she said quietly. She pressed her daughters close and whispered, "Remember, my children, the world will not always be fair, but you must remain strong." Maduka, caught up in the celebration, did not notice Adeze's pain. For the first time in months his pride was whole again. The villagers praised him, shouting his name and admiring the newborn. "Maduka's house is complete," they declared. Yet within the compound a quiet tension grew. The daughters could sense the difference in treatment. Where they had once received love and attention from their father, now it was reserved for Ifeoma's son. Kayamaka, the eldest, looked up at Adaeze. "Mother, why does father smile so at him but not at us?" Adaeze held her daughter's face in her hands. "Because some people see what they want to see," she said softly. "But remember, our worth is not decided by him or anyone else. It is decided by our hearts, our actions, and our strength." The celebration continued late into the night, with laughter, music, and the aroma of roasted goat filling the air. Maduka sat proudly beside Ifeoma, the baby in his arms, dreaming of the day this son would carry on his name. And in the shadows Adaeze remained with her daughters, silently vowing that they would rise above envy, favoritism, and pride. If this story is gripping you, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and comment below. Tell us what you think Adaeze will do next, and how her daughters will grow under such challenging circumstances. Because the next chapter will show how envy, pride, and favoritism begin to slowly destroy what Maduka once cherished most. The days that followed the birth of Ifeoma's son were filled with celebration, but also with a quiet, simmering tension. Maduka's attention remained fixed on the baby. Every smile, every soft word, every gesture of pride was reserved for the boy. Adaeze noticed, and so did the daughters. Ifeoma, sensing the growing unease, began to speak openly, often in Adaze's presence. "You see, Adaeze," she said one afternoon while sorting clothes in the courtyard, "this is how a man should be honored. A son brings respect, position, pride. Your daughters, they are sweet, yes, but they cannot carry a name. They cannot bring the same joy." Adaze's hand stilled, her fingers clutching the cloth she was folding. She looked up at Ifeoma calmly. "Each child has value," she said quietly. "Your son is a blessing, yes, but so are my daughters. Do not mistake privilege for worth." Ifeoma laughed lightly, almost mockingly. "Privilege? No, Adaeze. This is what matters in life. The ancestors, the village, they all know it. A woman who cannot give sons is, well, she fails her husband and her family." Adaze's heart tightened, but she did not respond further. She held herself with quiet dignity, as she always had. Maduka, meanwhile, noticed none of this tension, or chose to ignore it. He continued showering the new wife with praise, gifts, and attention, speaking softly to her in ways he no longer spoke to Adaeze. One evening, as the women were preparing dinner, Ifeoma deliberately spoke louder. "It is strange, Adaeze, that you worked so hard and still have nothing to show the family but daughters. Perhaps you were not meant for this household." Adaeze met her gaze calmly. "I gave life. I raised these children. They are strong, kind, and full of honor. That is more than many can claim." Ifeoma's lips curled into a smirk. "We shall see. The world judges by sons, Adaeze. Sons carry the name, the legacy, not daughters." By now, the daughters were old enough to understand much of what was being said. Kayamaka, the eldest, pressed herself against her mother. "Mother, why does she hate us?" Adaeze held her close. "She does not hate you. She only fears what she cannot control. Remember, my daughter, respect yourself and do not let anyone's words diminish you." Outside, villagers continued to talk. The news of the boy's birth and the favoritism toward him spread like fire. Some men shook their heads, pitying Adaeze. Others whispered about how Ifeoma would dominate the household. Inside, the compound felt smaller, heavier. Every glance from Ifeoma carried judgment. Every smile from Maduka reserved for the son widened the invisible divide. Adaeze began noticing how chores were being divided. The daughters were asked to perform more labor, often while the son rested in his mother's arms. Ifeoma openly mocked minor mistakes, calling the daughters clumsy or slow. One day, Adaze's youngest daughter spilled water while fetching from the well. Ifeoma laughed harshly. "See, girls are always clumsy. No wonder your father needed a son elsewhere." Adaeze clenched her jaw but said nothing. She led her daughter away quietly, whispering, "Do not let her words touch your heart. You are stronger than this. That evening, Maduka sat by the fire with Ifeoma cradling the boy. Adaeze served food quietly, her eyes fixed on the fire. She could feel the house slipping from her hands piece by piece. If this story has kept your heart racing, remember to hit like, subscribe, and comment below. Share how you would protect your children in such a household. Because the coming months will push Adaeze and her daughters into trials they could never have imagined, testing not just their patience but the very essence of their strength. Years passed, and Adaeze gave birth to more daughters. Each child brought joy to her heart, but with every daughter Maduka's patience thinned, and Ifeoma's confidence grew. By the time the seventh daughter arrived, the compound had transformed into a house of tension, rivalry, and subtle cruelty. Adaeze labored silently, enduring the pain with the same quiet strength she had shown for years. Maduka paced outside the small room, a storm of anticipation and anxiety in his chest. He had prayed, hoped, and feared. Each daughter had been healthy, yes, but none fulfilled the desire he carried: a son to continue his name. The midwife emerged hours later, holding the tiny newborn. "My chief," she said gently, "it is another girl." Maduka froze. His hands clenched at his sides. "Another girl?" he whispered, as if the words themselves were unbearable. Adaeze held the baby to her chest, whispering softly, "Do not fear, little one. You are a blessing." Ifeoma, who had been waiting impatiently outside, smiled triumphantly. "See, Maduka? Even now she gives only daughters. This is why a man must look elsewhere for sons." Maduka turned his gaze to the tiny child in Adaeze's arms. His pride warred with the love he once felt. He wanted to scold, to rage, but his voice faltered. He simply nodded, avoiding Adaeze's eyes. That evening the decision was made. Ifeoma suggested that Adaeze and her daughters move to the small, neglected hut behind the main house. "It will give me space to care for the boy properly," she said slyly, knowing her words would sting. Maduka, still trapped by pride and desire for a son, agreed silently. He did not raise his voice, but his silence was deafening. The next morning, Adaeze and her 7 daughters were moved to the dilapidated hut. Its roof leaked, the floors were uneven, and the walls bore cracks from years of neglect. Yet Adaeze entered with calm dignity. She gathered her children close, whispering, "We will endure. We will thrive. No one can take your worth from you." The daughters, sensing the injustice, looked at their mother with wide eyes. Kayamika, now older and wiser, asked quietly, "Mother, will father ever care for us again?" Adaeze held her daughter's face gently. "We do not depend on his love, my child. We will build our own strength. We will carry ourselves with pride." Life in the abandoned hut was harsh, but Adaeze taught her daughters resilience, practical skills, and respect. She reminded them daily that the world was watching, that their strength would one day shine brighter than favoritism or pride. Meanwhile, in the main house, Ifeoma's son was indulged and celebrated. Maduka lavished attention, ignoring complaints from neighbors and warnings from elders about the dangers of spoiling a child. The contrast between the households grew sharper by the day. Adaeze's daughters learned discipline, responsibility, and self-reliance. Ifeoma's son learned indulgence, arrogance, and entitlement. And so, the seeds of future triumph and future shame were sown in the two halves of the compound. One nurtured with love and values, the other with pride and favoritism. If this story has moved you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts about Adaeze's strength and how she is raising her daughters. Because the story is only beginning to reveal how patience, wisdom, and integrity can triumph over envy, pride, and indulgence. In the abandoned hut behind the main house, Adaeze's daughters began to grow into remarkable young women. Each day brought lessons in patience, hard work, and dignity. While the compound outside celebrated indulgence and favoritism, this smaller, neglected space became a sanctuary of discipline and love. Kayamika, the eldest, took on the role of caretaker for her younger sisters. She taught them how to fetch water efficiently, prepare meals, and mend clothes. She taught them the value of honesty and respect, even when others showed none. Adaeze watched quietly, proud of each small victory. "Remember," she would say, "no one can give you dignity, you must earn it for yourself. The world will notice those who carry themselves with honor." Despite the hardship, laughter often rang through the hut. The daughters found joy in small things: a game under the mango tree, a song sung softly in the evenings, or the pride in completing a difficult chore together. Meanwhile, in the main house, Ifeoma's son, Ikenna, grew under very different circumstances. He was indulged in every possible way. When he misbehaved, he was excused with laughter or defended with excuses. Every minor wrongdoing was overlooked. Every act of arrogance rewarded. His younger brother followed the same pattern. They believed the world existed to serve them. Respect was foreign to them. Discipline was a concept they never encountered. As the daughters matured, neighbors began to take notice. They admired the girls' poise, the way they carried themselves, the respect they showed in every interaction. Teachers praised them for their intelligence and curiosity. Elders nodded with approval, whispering to one another about the remarkable young women Adaeze had raised. Meanwhile, reports of the son's behavior began to filter into the village. Theft, disrespect, and reckless antics became common knowledge. People shook their heads, noting how indulgence without discipline could destroy even the most promising children. One day, Kayamika approached her mother with wide eyes. "Mother, the villagers keep talking about Ikenna. They say he is becoming unruly, stealing from markets, and insulting elders." Adaeze nodded slowly. "That is what happens when children are spoiled," she said. "They will eventually face the consequences of their actions. Our concern is how we raise ourselves. Remember, my children, our character is more valuable than wealth, more important than power, more enduring than pride." The daughters listened closely, internalizing every word. They were learning that strength came not from force, but from patience, wisdom, and integrity. Outside, the contrast between the two halves of the compound became undeniable. In the main house, laughter was often cruel, filled with mockery or arrogance. In the abandoned hut, laughter was rich with love, humility, and resilience. Adaeze smiled softly one evening as she watched her daughters clean the small yard. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "you will carry yourselves with dignity. You will make the world see your worth." And so the first seeds of pride, achievement, and future success were planted. The daughters learned early that life rewarded patience and character, while indulgence and favoritism could only produce shame. If you are captivated by this story, pause now to like the video, subscribe, and comment below. Share your thoughts on how Adaeze's daughters are growing into remarkable young women. Because soon the son's misbehavior will escalate, and Maduka's pride will be challenged like never before. While Adaeze's daughters flourished in their small, disciplined world, the sons in the main house grew increasingly reckless. Ikenna and his younger brother, spoilt from birth, began to test limits with alarming boldness. They sneered at the servants, mocked the elders, and laughed at rules they were told to follow. Maduka, blinded by pride and obsession with having a son, excused most of their behavior. "Boys will be boys," he would say, dismissing reports of theft, fighting, or disrespect. Each misdeed seemed to fuel the son's sense of entitlement. Neighbors whispered, shaking their heads. "Maduka's sons are becoming a disaster," they said. "All that favoritism will destroy the household." One afternoon, Ikenna returned from the market, laughing loudly, holding a basket of goods he had taken without paying. A merchant ran after him, shouting, "Stop, you thief!" Ikenna shrugged, tossing the basket over his shoulder. "Relax, it's mine now," he called back, laughing with his brother. The merchant, furious, stormed to Maduka's house. "Your sons are stealing from everyone in the village," he exclaimed. Maduka waved him off. "Don't exaggerate. They're just boys. Teach them to be careful next time." Adaeze, observing quietly from her hut, felt a chill. She knew this indulgence would not go unpunished. She whispered to her daughters, "You see what happens when children grow without discipline. Remember, our strength comes from patience, not indulgence." Days passed, and the sons' misbehavior worsened. They began to form alliances with bad company, learning vices that would eventually lead them into serious trouble. Fighting, theft, and public disrespect became their daily routines. Even Ifeoma, once proud of her sons, began to complain quietly to Maduka. "Father, perhaps we should correct them," she suggested cautiously. But Maduka's pride would not allow it. "They are my sons," he said firmly. "They will learn on their own." Meanwhile, the daughters continued to shine. Their intelligence, kindness, and diligence became known throughout the village. Teachers praised them openly. Elders sought them for advice. Villagers whispered that Adaeze's daughters would one day bring honor far beyond the household's walls. One evening, Kayamika asked her mother, "Mother, why does father treat the sons like kings but we have to work so hard?" Adaeze held her daughter close. "Because he sees what he wants, not what is true. But our worth is in our actions, our heart, and our strength. One day, the world will see who truly carries honor." The first serious consequence of the son's indulgence came when the village elders confronted Maduka. "Your sons are running wild," one said sternly. "They are stealing, fighting, and disrespecting everyone. This will bring shame to your household." Maduka shrugged. "They are boys. Let them grow. Discipline will come when needed." The elders shook their heads, realizing he had blinded himself with pride. As the sun set, Adaeze watched quietly, knowing that the recklessness of the sons would eventually bring disaster. And when it did, it would serve as a stark contrast to the strength and dignity of her daughters. If this story is keeping you hooked, remember to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts about what consequences you expect for Maduka's sons. Because soon the first real disaster will strike, changing the entire household forever. The recklessness of Maduka's sons soon escalated beyond mischief into serious crimes. Ikena and his younger brother began stealing from local merchants, destroying property, and even threatening those who dared challenge them. The village, once respectful of Maduka, began to murmur in disapproval. One morning, the village market erupted in chaos. A merchant shouted, "Those boys! They took my wares again." Several neighbors rushed to intervene, but Ikena laughed, brandishing a small stick as if daring anyone to stop him. Word quickly reached the elders. They convened at the village square, their faces grave. "Maduka Nwoi," Elder Obi began, "your sons are bringing shame to your family and the entire village. Their behavior is beyond correction through words alone." Maduka, still blinded by pride, waved his hand dismissively. "They are my sons. They will learn responsibility in their own time. Leave them be." The elders exchanged worried glances. "If you do not act, we will be forced to involve the authorities. Your household's reputation, and the lives of these children, are at stake." Meanwhile, Adaeze and her daughters observed the growing tension from their hut. Kayamika, now perceptive and cautious, whispered to her mother, "Mother, the boys' actions, will they hurt others?" Adaeze nodded gravely. "Yes, my child. When pride blinds a father, his children may destroy themselves. We must remain steadfast in our own path." As the days passed, the sons' crimes intensified. They were caught stealing livestock, starting fights, and even colluding with criminals from neighboring villages. Each incident was a blow to Maduka's pride, yet he still refused to discipline them. One afternoon, news arrived that Ikena and his brother had been caught attempting to steal from the compound of a prominent elder. The villagers were outraged. "This is the end of patience," one elder declared. "Maduka must answer for his negligence." The authorities arrived shortly after, taking the sons into custody. Maduka for the first time felt the weight of his decisions. His pride, which had once protected him from acknowledging the truth, now seemed empty and fragile. Adaeze, who had watched silently from her hut, received Maduka at her doorstep one evening. He stood awkwardly, guilt evident in his posture. "Adaeze, I have failed," he admitted, his voice low and broken. "I ignored warnings, indulged them, and now..." Adaeze looked at him with calm dignity. "Now you see the consequences of pride and favoritism," she said softly. "Love cannot be conditional. Discipline cannot be selective. You chose what to nurture, and now you face the results." Maduka hung his head ashamed. For the first time, he truly understood the value of his daughters and the wisdom of Adaeze's guidance. The village watched as the transformation became clear. The sons, once celebrated, were now a source of shame. The daughters, nurtured with care, respect, and discipline, had grown into admirable young women. If this story has kept you captivated, take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment below about the contrast between the daughter's success and the son's downfall. Because the next chapter will reveal Maduka's attempts at reconciliation and the lessons he must finally confront. Maduka stood at the edge of the path leading to the small hut behind the main house, his chest tight with a mixture of shame and longing. The events of the past weeks had left him hollow. His sons, once the center of his pride, were now in the hands of the authorities, facing the consequences of a lifetime of indulgence and poor guidance. He hesitated, gripping the walking stick he had taken from the main house. He had not come to boast, nor to demand forgiveness. He came to face the truth of his failures. Adaeze, seeing him approach from the hut doorway, maintained her calm composure. She held the youngest daughter in her arms, while the others, Kayamika, Amara, and the rest, stood quietly behind her, observing the man who had once ruled their household with pride and favoritism. Adaeze, Maduka began, his voice shaking. I have wronged you. I have wronged our daughters. I allowed pride and desire for a son to blind me. I see now. I see the harm I caused. Adaeze did not immediately respond. She studied him, noting the weariness etched into his face. Maduka, she said softly, words cannot undo what has been done. Actions shape the future, not apologies alone. He nodded, swallowing hard. I understand, but I came to ask for guidance. To seek your forgiveness if you can grant it. I wish to make amends. I wish to see our daughters respected, and to restore some dignity to this family. Adaeze's gaze softened slightly. She could see his remorse was genuine, but years of conditional love and favoritism could not be erased with a few words. Maduka, your regret comes too late for the sons, she said calmly. But for the daughters we have lived, learned, and grown strong despite your absence of care. Your recognition does not erase their struggle, but it may help you understand the path you should take from here. He looked at the daughters standing proudly behind their mother. Their eyes met his, steady and filled with quiet strength. He felt a pang of longing, of pride not yet lost but tempered with understanding. I have failed as a father, he whispered. I saw what I wanted, ignored what was given, and now, I fear I have nothing but shame left. Adaeze stepped closer. Shame belongs to pride, not children. Your sons will face consequences. Your daughters, they have learned that love, patience, and diligence build strength. You may still learn from them if you choose to act wisely. For the first time, Maduka felt a glimmer of hope, not in a son, but in the daughters he had once undervalued. He realized that the true legacy of a household was not measured by sons or inheritance, but by values, character, and care. The village watched quietly from afar, noting the transformation in Maduka. Where once there had been arrogance and blind favoritism, now there was humility and reflection. The daughter's dignity had become a mirror showing him what he had missed. Adaeze, with quiet authority, offered him a path forward. If you truly wish to restore honor, you will act with fairness, respect, and guidance, not indulgence. Learn from your mistakes. Support your daughters. Accept that every child is a blessing, regardless of gender. Maduka nodded, understanding the weight of her words. I will. Promise. I will change. And so the first steps toward reconciliation began, not with dramatic gestures, but with quiet acknowledgement and the understanding that pride, indulgence, and conditional love had consequences that could not be ignored. If you are following this story closely, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts about Maduka's change and the lessons we can learn from Adaeze's strength. Because the next chapter will reveal how the daughter's resilience continues to shine, even as the family begins to rebuild. Time passed, and the daughter's strength, discipline, and resilience began to bear visible fruit. Kayamika, Amara, and their younger sisters grew into young women admired by the village. Their intelligence, humility, and work ethic were unmatched, and even those who once mocked Adaeze's family could not ignore their rising reputation. In the mornings, the daughters rose early, tending to chores, schooling themselves, and supporting each other. Adaeze guided them with patience and wisdom, teaching that true strength was built through perseverance, kindness, and courage. Meanwhile, the main house, once loud with the sons' misbehavior, became quieter. Ikenna and his brother had been taken away by authorities. Their recklessness had finally led to consequences. Maduka felt the weight of those events daily, but it also forced him to reevaluate his priorities. The contrast between the two halves of the compound could not have been more stark. In the abandoned hut, laughter was warm, full of joy and respect. In the main house, absence and regret marked every corner. Kayamika, now capable and confident, began helping her mother teach her younger sisters not only practical skills, but also critical thinking and problem-solving. They read together under the mango tree, debated small household decisions, and celebrated every accomplishment, no matter how small. The villagers started to notice. Elders spoke of Adaeze's daughters with admiration. "Those girls will bring honor to Maduka's household," they whispered. "They carry themselves with dignity, far beyond their years." Even Maduka could not ignore the change. He began to observe quietly the way the daughters supported one another, the way they approached problems with wisdom, and the respect they earned from the villagers. One afternoon, Adaeze sat with her daughters in the yard. "You see, my children," she said softly, "strength comes not from force, privilege, or indulgence. It comes from patience, care, and the choices you make every day. Never forget that." Amara, the second eldest, nodded. "Mother, the village is beginning to admire us. Even father seems different." Adaeze smiled faintly. "Yes, child. He is beginning to understand slowly that pride and favoritism are empty. True honor comes from nurturing, not indulging. Our task is to live rightly, and the world will follow our example." The daughters began to gain education, learn trades, and engage with the community. They were respected in markets, schools, and gatherings. Their reputation became a testament to Adaeze's wisdom, her quiet endurance, and her unwavering principles. In the main house, Maduka's guilt weighed heavily. He had lost the chance to shape his sons into honorable men, but he could still learn from his daughter's example. He began to correct his mistakes, showing respect, acknowledging the daughter's achievements, and offering support. For the first time, the household began to heal. Laughter returned, not the arrogant laughter of indulgence, but the warm, genuine joy of accomplishment, respect, and family unity. If this story has inspired you, pause to like the video, subscribe, and comment below about how you think values and discipline can shape children's futures. Because the next chapter will show the full extent of the son's disgrace and how Adaeze's daughters rise above, cementing the story's ultimate moral lesson. The consequences of Ikenna and his brother's indulgence reached their peak. Word spread across the village that they had been arrested for serious theft and collusion with criminals from neighboring areas. Maduka's pride, once a shield against criticism, lay shattered. He could no longer ignore the reality of his failures. The villagers whispered openly now. "Maduka Nwoy's sons were spoiled and reckless. Look at the ruin they've caused." The elders shook their heads, some offering quiet sympathy, others outright scorn. Maduka walked through the compound, his steps heavy. He saw the empty rooms where indulgence had once reigned, felt the absence of the chaos his sons had brought, and understood, painfully, that he had ignored years of warnings. Adaeze observed silently from the hut. Her daughters gathered around her. She spoke softly to them. "Remember this day. It shows what pride and indulgence can do, even in a household with love. But also see what patience and guidance can create. Never forget your worth." Kayamika, now fully aware of the contrast, whispered, "Mother, the village sees it too. They respect us more than ever." "Yes, my child," Adaeze replied. "We never sought recognition, but living rightly earns it. Actions matter more than words." Maduka, racked with guilt, approached Adaeze once more. His voice was low, almost trembling. "I have lost my sons to my pride," he admitted. "I have seen now the wisdom I ignored, the guidance I refused. My daughters, they are the true reflection of what I should have nurtured." Adaeze held her gaze steady. "The lessons are clear, Maduka. Pride, favoritism, and conditional love destroy. Love, discipline, and patience build. Your daughter's honor reflects the care you neglected to give elsewhere." The daughters, standing beside Adaeze, looked at their father without malice. They felt the weight of past neglect, but also a sense of hope. They had grown strong not because of him but in spite of him. In the main house, Maduka began to make changes. He restored respect for the daughters, acknowledged their achievements publicly, and sought guidance on how to act as a responsible father. The villagers began to notice the shift, slowly, as humility replaced arrogance. Even Ifeoma watched quietly. Her son's disgrace was a bitter lesson, but she could see the daughter's influence on the household, and the slow redemption of Maduka's character. Adaeze, however, remained calm. She knew the true victory was not in public approval, but in the strength, values, and wisdom her daughters now embodied. The contrast between the daughters and the sons was now undeniable. Where indulgence had led to shame, patience and guidance had produced respect, accomplishment, and dignity. Maduka finally understood that his legacy would not be defined by sons alone. The daughters he once overlooked had become the pillars of the household, shining examples of what care, discipline, and love could create. If this story has kept you captivated, pause to like the video, subscribe, and comment below. Share your thoughts on how character and guidance shape children's futures more than wealth, birth order, or gender. Because the next chapter will show the final confrontation and reflection, cementing the story's ultimate moral lesson about pride, love, and the value of every child. The day Maduka returned to the hut, it felt different. No longer was it a space of exile or shame. It had become a home filled with resilience, laughter, and dignity. Adaeze stood at the doorway, her daughters lined up behind her. Their eyes held the calm authority of those who had endured, learned, and grown. Maduka's voice trembled as he spoke. Adaeze, I see now. I have been blind, chasing pride instead of nurturing life. I have ignored what mattered most. Adaeze nodded slowly. Maduka, words alone cannot restore what was lost. But your willingness to understand, to act with care and respect, is the first step. The daughters you once overlooked are your greatest legacy. They have built strength where neglect and indulgence failed. Kayamika stepped forward, courage evident in her posture. Father, we have lived with patience, love, and responsibility. We did not seek your approval, but it matters that you now recognize our worth. Maduka felt a sharp pang of regret. He lowered his eyes. I cannot undo the past, but I wish to honor it now. To support you, to guide you, and to rebuild what I have damaged. Adaeze studied him for a long moment. Finally she spoke. Actions, Maduka, not promises. Show through your deeds that you have learned humility, fairness, and love without condition. Only then can the household truly heal. For the first time, Maduka truly understood. The daughters, nurtured with discipline and care, had grown into remarkable women. Their strength and wisdom illuminated the failures of indulgence and favoritism. He looked at each of them. Kayamika, steadfast and wise. Amara, determined and confident. The younger daughters, disciplined, curious, and full of dignity. He felt a deep, quiet pride, different from the pride of a father who demanded sons, but a deeper pride of one who witnessed what true guidance and love could produce. Adaeze placed a gentle hand on his arm. You have learned that children are blessings, regardless of gender. Sons do not guarantee honor. Daughters can bring greatness when nurtured with patience, love, and values. Never forget this. The sun dipped low behind the compound, casting a golden light across the hut. For the first time, Maduka saw the household not as divided, but as whole. The daughters, once dismissed, now stood as pillars of hope, integrity, and wisdom. Ifeoma and her son, facing disgrace outside the village, could only watch from afar as the true measure of strength and guidance became clear. Adaeze's quiet endurance had not only preserved her family but had elevated them. Maduka knelt briefly, a gesture of humility and acknowledgement. Thank you for teaching me, even when I would not listen. Your daughters, my children, are my greatest gift, and I promise to honor them with respect, love, and guidance. The daughters smiled, a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. Adaeze nodded, satisfied that the lessons had been learned, and that the household could finally heal. If you've been captivated by this story, take a moment now to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing which character inspired you the most. Because the final chapter will seal the story's ultimate moral, showing the lasting power of patience, discipline, and unconditional love. As the weeks turned to months, Adaeze's daughters began to shine beyond the household. The villagers, once quick to mock and judge, could no longer ignore their strength, wisdom, and diligence. Stories of their achievements spread quietly at first, then loudly, as neighbors began to admire what patience and guidance could produce. Kayamika earned recognition for her intelligence and leadership among the youth. Amara became known for her skill in crafts and helping others, while the younger daughters excelled in school, chores, and household management. Their collective reputation became a testament to Adaeze's careful, unwavering guidance. Maduka observed quietly, humbled by the transformation. The same daughters he had once dismissed were now the true pillars of the family and the community. Their respectfulness and accomplishments inspired admiration and curiosity. Even the village elders nodded approvingly, saying, Adaeze has raised daughters who carry the family's honor far better than pride and indulgence ever could. The son's misdeeds, in stark contrast, were still a source of shame. Villagers shook their heads, recounting the chaos and destruction Ikena and his brother had caused. Their downfall served as a cautionary tale, a clear example of what happens when pride and indulgence outweigh discipline and care. Adaeze gathered her daughters in the yard one evening. "See, my children," she said gently. "The world rewards those who live with integrity, patience, and love. Your achievements are not simply for pride. They are proof that character and discipline endure, while arrogance and indulgence crumble." Kayamika nodded thoughtfully. "Mother, even father seems different now. He respects us and seems to understand what you taught us." Adaeze smiled faintly. "Yes, and now he will see the value of guiding children with love, fairness, and patience. But remember, my daughters, you must continue to live rightly, regardless of whether others see or praise you." In the village, neighbors now sought Adaeze's daughters for advice, help, and collaboration. They respected the household that had once been dismissed as insignificant. The compound, once divided by favoritism and neglect, had become a model of virtue, diligence, and harmony. Even Maduka learned to measure his pride carefully. He celebrated his daughter's successes with humility, often telling villagers, "These are the true blessings of our household. Their worth is beyond any son I might have wished for." The contrast between the two sides of the family was now undeniable. Where indulgence had led to disgrace, patience and guidance had produced honor. The daughter's rise became a story repeated throughout the village, proof that love, values, and discipline shape destiny far more than birth order, wealth, or favoritism. Adaeze, watching her daughters play in the golden afternoon light, whispered softly, "Every child is a blessing, and every child's future depends on the care and guidance they receive. Remember this lesson always." If you've been inspired by this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Share which lessons you will carry with you from Adaeze and her daughter's journey, because the final chapter will show the lasting legacy of these lessons, cementing the truth that character, patience, and unconditional love outshine pride, favoritism, and indulgence. Years passed, and the household once divided by pride and favoritism had transformed completely. Adaeze's daughters were no longer children. They were accomplished young women whose virtues extended far beyond the walls of the hut where they had grown up. Their intelligence, strength, and integrity were admired throughout the village, setting an example for all. Kayamika became a respected community leader, guiding youth and helping resolve conflicts. Amar pursued a trade and helped provide for neighbors in need, while the younger daughters excelled in education and small businesses, bringing honor to the household. Maduka, though older and wiser now, walked humbly among the villagers. He publicly acknowledged the lessons he had learned, that pride, indulgence, and favoritism could destroy a household, while patience, love, and discipline built a legacy that endured. Even Ifeoma and her son, once celebrated for the birth of a boy, had become a cautionary tale. Ikena and his brother, corrupted by indulgence, continued to face the consequences of their recklessness. The villagers often remarked on the stark contrast. Where guidance and care had built respect and success, indulgence had created shame. Adaeze, standing with her daughters one evening as the sun set over the compound, reflected quietly. "The true worth of a child," she said softly, "is not measured by gender, by wealth, or by what they inherit. It is measured by character, discipline, and love. Every child is a blessing, and every child's future depends on how they are nurtured." Her daughters, understanding the weight of her words, nodded. They had lived through trials, ridicule, and neglect, yet had grown into remarkable women through patience, care, and determination. Their strength became a living testimony of the lessons Adaeze had instilled. Maduka approached them, his voice full of humility. "I once sought honor in sons alone," he admitted, "but I now see that true legacy comes from guidance, love, and respect. You, my daughters, are the foundation of my household and the example for our family and village." The villagers witnessed this reconciliation and transformation, understanding that pride and societal expectation are not the measure of a family's worth. The daughters' achievements, dignity, and resilience had rewritten the household story. Adaeze's quiet endurance. Adaeze's quiet endurance had become the heartbeat of the household. Her daughter's strength, humility, and wisdom were a living proof that values mattered far more than favoritism, pride, or societal expectations. The hut behind the main house, once a place of exile and shame, had become a symbol of resilience, dignity, and hope. Maduka had learned the deepest lesson of his life, that conditional love and indulgence bring ruin, while patience, guidance, and unconditional care create lasting legacy. Every step he took was now measured by respect, not pride, by humility, not arrogance. The daughters continued to excel. Kayamaka led community projects, helping improve education and resolving disputes with fairness. Amara's skill and generosity touched the lives of many, inspiring others to value diligence and character. The younger daughters brought innovation, care, and intelligence to the household, reinforcing the lesson that guidance and love shape destiny. Neighbors, elders, and even strangers marveled at the transformation. Adaeze's household, once mocked, had become a model of what life could be when love, discipline, and patience guide parenting. In contrast, the son's disgrace remained a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences of indulgence, pride, and neglect. One evening, Adaeze gathered her daughters in the courtyard. "Remember," she said softly, "life will always test you. Others may seek to judge, to favor, or to ignore. But the strength of your character will define your journey. You have already proven that dignity, patience, and love are more powerful than privilege, wealth, or gender." Maduka, standing nearby, nodded solemnly. "Your mother's words are true," he said. "I have seen firsthand the cost of my mistakes. But I have also seen the rewards of care, guidance, and respect. You are the proof that every child, boy or girl, is a blessing when nurtured with love and values." The village slowly began to internalize the lesson. Conversations shifted from gossip to admiration. Parents reflected on how they raised their children. Elders cited Adaeze's daughters as examples in teaching and counsel. The story of the household's rise from neglect and indulgence became a timeless lesson for all. As the sun set, Adaeze looked at her daughters with quiet pride. "Your journey is far from over," she said. "But remember, you carry with you the truth that every child matters. Let this story guide you and others." If you've been inspired by Adaeze and her daughter's journey, take a moment now to like the video, subscribe, and comment below with which lesson touched you most. Share this story to spread the message that every child is a blessing and that patience, guidance, and love shape the future. The household, once divided by pride and societal expectation, was now united in dignity, wisdom, and lasting legacy. Adaeze's daughters, nurtured with care and values, stood as a shining example for generations to come.